we see how we covered this, how we addressed this in the first workshop. So we talked about unintended consequences of complex systems, and that today's problems are often yesterday's solutions. We also tried to develop a working definition of a system that it consists of elements of interconnections which try to achieve a common purpose. And we also defined system thinking, and that we're aiming to see the dynamic patterns, the causal structures, and also the mental models that are behind the quite obvious events on the surface. So we use this iceberg metaphor to visualize that. And with these fundamentals, with this understanding, we can then, on the next slide, move to phase one. So if there is a certain topic, if there's a system, if there's a problem where we want to gain clarity. And in this phase, it's most important to talk and especially listen to the stakeholders, trying to see what are different concerns, what are topics within the system. And with this information, we try to synthesize the data and the feedback we get and develop a system map with kind of an overview of the different forces within the system. And also very important here is that we want to understand the emotions and especially intentions that are driving the stakeholders within the system. And here we also looked at different tools on the next slide. So mainly we identified and focused on the tool of the system map, which allows us to identify the different factors and see how are they interconnected within the system. We also saw that the world is consisting of dynamic patterns, as we can see in the Corona development, but also in our little game of the paper fold. And we used the key concepts of system thinking, like feedback loops and delays, to explain how do certain systems over time actually develop. And we also looked at emotions of stakeholders, as we realized that certain systemic structures can be locked in, can especially lock our stakeholders within a trap, within a certain situation, and this can lead to very strong emotions and partly resistance. And it's always important to try to see what are the reasons for those emotions, so to develop such a systemic structural perspective on the problem. So when we developed this kind of clarity, when we have this big picture and really understand how do the different stakeholders interact and why, we can move on to the second phase on the next slide, which is theorizing change. So we want to use the understanding that we gained to explore different trajectories. Where could the system develop into the future? We want to identify promising interventions, what we could do, and based on that, develop a system-based and dynamic theory of change. So the tools we looked at here on the next slide, Matthias. So here we introduced the idea of system archetypes, which are kind of recurrent patterns and structures in many different systems. We use those archetypes to see what might be possible future developments, future scenarios of our system, to then develop interventions and use the system map for a dynamic theory of change. So we can say, okay, if we interact here at this point of the system, how will this actually over time impact the other areas of our system? And finally, at the end of our last workshop, we also looked at quantitative simulation models, where we can go even a step further for rigorous analysis, and we can actually simulate what different policies might impact in the system over time. And there we had the example of a region and their response to a COVID spread. And on the next slide. So these kind of first three phases were what we covered, what we wanted to cover in the workshops. However, just also a few words about kind of the following phases. Phase 3 is then mostly about acting collectively. So we want to design and prototype our interventions, test our assumptions, and especially also enable the stakeholders to share the power, to share the responsibility of implementing those interventions. And on the next slide, the last step of one process round is then when we implement the interventions, we also want to monitor and see what actually happens in the system. So did we achieve our goals? Is our theory of change actually correct? Or does it somehow diverge from what we see in the real world? And this is important that we can continuously learn from the system, and that this can then also feed back into phase 1, the clarity process, that we can actually understand what is happening. And the next slide. Yes, so this is basically kind of an overview of how such a systemic journey could look like in practice. And yeah, I hope it helps a little bit to put all the different tools and methods that we looked at in the first 2 workshops a little bit more into perspective, and how we can actually use them together. And to the next slide, please. Yeah, and based on that, especially as we run out of time a little bit at the end of the last workshop, we also wanted to use a little bit of time now to open up the room for your questions, eventually based on questions that appeared in the last 2 workshops, or also in the meantime to today's workshops. Can be about the content or the general approach of systems practice. And we were thinking to organize this a little bit, that if you have questions, you can think about them for a second, write them in the chat box, and then we can actually see and try to cluster the questions a little bit before answering them. Oh yeah, thanks for the hint, Matthias. You can, of course, also write your questions in Spanish, and then we take care of translating them.
And just to note that we have also made some time at the end of the session for Q&A. So if you feel like you want to ask the question at the end of the practice, that's also okay. Just to mention that there will be 2 Q&A.
Thanks, Simon, for your question. I just see it. You can already get at it, while the others can still think if there are questions and formulate them. So Simon is asking, do all systems fit into your circular model? So I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, I guess with a circular model, you mean kind of this process that I just showed on the previous slides. Yeah, I see the thumb up and nodding. Great. Theoretically, yes. I mean, of course, it's always the question, does the problem actually qualify for like a systemic inquiry? If it's like a simple solution, or if there's only one solution that is actually viable, the systemic inquiry might not be the best tool to use. So we use kind of this approach in general if it's about, yeah, a relatively complex issue with a lot of stakeholders. Maybe in the past, we already tried something, but it didn't work. The problem persists over a long time. So these are kind of characteristics when we would say, we would think about using a systems inquiry and a systems practice. And then if we decided that we want to use the system approach, I would mostly think it's actually necessary to think this circular, because the main goal of systems practice and system thinking is to learn. We want to improve our learning how the real world is actually working. And if it's complex, if it's uncertain, this is almost never possible with just like doing a system map once and like in a waterfall approach, then doing the interventions, implemented and done. We always want to monitor. We always want to see, do our assumptions, are they correct? We want to validate them and then actually improve our understanding over time.
And there's another question coming from Sandra. According to the cycle, implementation starts in phase 3, doesn't it? Either implementation based on some plan or strategy as a result of the previous phases. I would say, of course, you know, like as we spoke in phase 2, we're actually developing a systemic theory of change in which we are using the causal loop diagram, the feedback loops to theorize, okay, if we change something in the system, how does it change that loop and other aspects in the system? So definitely that's based on a systemic theory of change. And just one thing I wanted to add on phase 3, we added that it's acting collectively and with shared leadership. What I would say on that is that we don't really have so many models of shared leadership. We have models of collaboration, but this is a very new area of work. How do we do shared leadership? In this workshop, we're not actually going into shared leadership. We're actually focusing on the first 2 phases. So just to make, how do you say that? To make that clear.
Thank you, Malika.
Anything else you want to add on that, Jean?
No, I think that was quite complete.
Okay, I'm sure maybe there will be questions at the end. So anytime that we save during the Q&A, we will keep it for the end for more Q&A. I'm sure as you do the practice yourself, there will be more questions that emerge. Yeah.
Great. And of course, if there's any questions emerging throughout the session, please, you can always type them into the Zoom. We're trying to always observing what's coming in and then pick them up at our other Q&A session at the end of the workshop. Great, then I would then wrap up the revision, and on the next slide, Matthias, hand over to Malika and let her introduce us deep listening and what it actually is.
So one of the most important skills, soft skills, I would say, or I usually call that suprahuman power, to be able to apply systems practice is to really be good at listening. And so today we will practice 3 types of listening. And in general, in systems practice, the way it's been taught before, we've only focused on 1 type of listening. But here today, because as Jean and I have reflected on, on systems practice for collective leadership, we believe the 2 other types of listening really will help you in collective leadership, because it helps you to understand the emotions in your system, the intentions in the system, and these are very important elements that's giving you information about what's happening in your system. So next slide, Matthias. So you see the run in the middle. So deep listening is something that you need for all the phases. So that's your suprahuman power that you need if you're going to apply, systems practice. Next slide. So in general, there are 4 types of listening. This is taken from Theory Review, if any of you are familiar with it. So many of us are engaged what is called the first level of listening. It's called listening from habits. So for example, we know there is a lot of confirmation bias. So we are just hearing what's just confirming what we already believe. So it's, you know, like many of us are just operating at this level because, you know, like we have certain mental models of the world. And as we hear information, we unconsciously just reconfirm those mental models. So where we want to go in systems practice and collective leadership is the other 3 levels of listening. So listening level 2 is what I call factual or non-judgmental listening. So this is when you start being like a little bit like a computer. You start hearing facts and figures and start noticing difference between your mental model of the world and the new information you're receiving. So that's why it's called the open mind, where you're disconfirming your data, your mental model, or you're creating new mental models as you're getting new information. So in systems practice, it's very important that we really listen with factual and with factual listening, which is the open mind. We have an open mind, so that, because basically in this practice, we really want to update how the system is. So if we just do the first step of listening, we will not get new information. But basically, we need to have that open mind so we can add more understanding of the system. So that's probably very clear. What we want also to do is the third type of listening, empathic emotional connection. So this is very important because we believe for multi-stakeholder dialogue, you need what we call, that's why we call the 3 sessions systems practice for collective leadership. So basically what you need is to understand your stakeholders, understand the system and the role and the stakeholders in that system. So for that, you need to really connect to that stakeholder, where they're coming from, how do they perceive the world, what do they fear, what's motivating them. So in this, actually, you engage your open heart. Actually, as you're listening, if you use those different organs, it really helps you to actually go into that types of listening. So for listening to with the open mind, if you engage the open mind, you visualize an open mind, you actually start opening, doing level 2. For level 3 empathic listening, if you engage, you use your organ of the heart to say, okay, open heart, I'm going to connect to that stakeholders. You actually start seeing through another person's eyes. You really start. And these are really, again, important information about your system, because it's telling you, if you go into the iceberg, it's like, what are the mental models? And below the mental models, what are the, what are the mindsets? What are the values? What's really important for your stakeholders? So these are really important. It's not only giving you information, it's allowing you to really connect, to really understand where they're coming from a heartfelt place. So listening for, this is the most, it's the most tricky one. And it's called listening with generative from the future. And it's a new type of practice, so it's a little bit more tricky. The word that I usually use is resonate. How are you resonating with that person? And as you resonate with the message that's coming out from what's emerging. Basically, it's type of listening where you're listening in a place where what's emerging into the future, what's being born. And it's only through having a listener and somebody who's listening to a listener can we understand that future that wants to emerge better. It's, how do you say that? Once you start practicing, you will really start understanding what I mean. It must still seem a little bit difficult right now. So basically, so we want to give feedback to that person or to a team, when we hear something below it, what's really waiting to emerge. So we're going to do a little exercise. Next slide, Matthias. Where from the 3 case studies that you will work today. So today we will have 3 case studies, one on traffic jam in the city, one on food shortage, and one on infection spread. And we will listen to 3 stakeholders, Jean will read the statement to me, and then I will use the open mind, the open heart, and the what you call listening with generativity, open will, you know, the courage. And he will read it to me, and I will say what I'm, for the first statement, which is a research expert about infection spread, I will say, what do I hear when I listen factually with curiosity? Okay, Jean?
Yes. So the research expert. We now have a clear evidence that infection spreads quickly between people. In fact, the more infected people are in contact with other people, the more dangerous contacts there are per day, and the higher the risk of newly infected people. Of course. However, the infection rate cannot grow forever, as the virus can only spread as long as there are susceptible people. With every new infected person, however, there are less susceptible people. And the smaller the group of susceptible people becomes, the smaller is the chance that contact between people leads to a new infection.
Okay, thank you, Jean. So what I'm hearing from the research expert is that this infection is spreading quickly. It spread quickly, and because it spreads quickly, there is the risk of dangerous contact is higher. And when there is more dangerous contact, there is a more infection population. There is an infectious population, but the more the populations become infected, the more the pool of susceptible people decreases. So this is what I'm hearing factually with the open mind, just collecting data. There's probably other information, but right now that's just what I've collected. So let's try now with the open heart. So I will hear from Jean what the rich city dweller in the case study of the food shortage says.
My father's family has farms in the Ayapasha region, and I heard from them that they are expecting a severe drought this year. As this is the breadbasket of our country, I'm worried that there will be a food crisis like we had 15 years ago. My family and I are preparing ourselves for the worst. My clan is building a huge granary in the city and in the Ayapasha to already store the amount of grains that we will need for this year.
Thank you, Jean. As you spoke, I felt some heart contraction. I could feel that that stakeholder was, you know, like had a lot of concern and was a little bit stressed and overwhelmed. And I sense, you know, like I sense anxiety, a little bit of panic, and really worry that they have to stand by themselves because the system, you know, like the system, the government won't able to resolve things, so they need to take action. So I sense this anxiety from this stakeholder. So, and the last one, which is the most tricky one, what emerges in me as I listen with generativity. Now we will use the city administrator with the traffic congestion case study.
As travel time to drive between different locations in the city has increased throughout the years, there was a lot of pressure from the population on us for building new roads to decongest traffic. Commuters desire a short travel time. We have invested heavily in road construction and therefore built new highways in the region. It helped to reduce congestion and ease the immediate pressure on our shoulders, but somehow we see travel time rising again and new complaints are just starting to come in.
Thank you. So as I listen, I sense a deep commitment from that city planner to do something. I sense that he's very connected to his stakeholders. He's listening to them. He's trying to resolve problems. And I sense, you know, like, I sense he's committed and there is still frustration. So I also engage my empathic listening here. But I sense that with this type of city administration, some, you know, like there is, you know, like that commitment to really stop traffic congestion. That's what I'm sensing that wants to emerge in the future. So these are the 3 practices of listening that we will do today in your case studies. And you will first start with just factual listening. And it's only at the end that you will do the 2 types of listening to gather more data. So you will use the same statement and then the same statement of the stakeholders and then try to gather more data with using the open heart and listening with generativity. But I'm already going into the case studies. I just wanted to tell you how this is relevant to what you're going to do later on. Next slide, Matthias. So I just wanted to summarize this 3 types of listening and the examples that we did, the play that we did for this. Next slide. So now the most exciting part of this session, we're going to be practicing. Over to you, Jean.
Thank you, Malika. Exactly, we're getting to the interactive hands-on part so that you can, as Malika said, try the 3 types of deep listening, but also develop your own system map and kind of to try how it is. Next slide, Matthias. To use again the circular process that we showed before, the exercise is mainly going to focus on phase 1, gain clarity. So we have some stakeholder statements prepared for you from those 3 different case studies. And we want to ask you to kind of identify what are the forces within the system and what are the different connections between them to make up this whole development in the system that we observe. The next slide. So exactly, so what we want to do, listen to the stakeholders and integrate their perspectives into a systemic picture. And as Malika mentioned, we have 3 case studies prepared. One is on traffic volume and to identify its drivers. The second is on the drivers of an infection spread. And the third is on the drivers of food shortage within a region. And next slide. Maybe 1 slide back. Sorry. So how we're going to do it is we're going to have 6 groups and 2 groups working on each of the topics. And you will do the same exercises. And at the end, we also want to have a little presentation of each of the groups. Of course, we won't have enough time to discuss all of the work each group did, but we want to get a little insight from your work and what you heard from the stakeholders. And so now to the next slide. So for the presentations, we thought of that group 1, 3, and 5 in 3 minutes can explain what did they learn that they otherwise would have not learned if they wouldn't have done the system map. And group 2, 4, and 6, there we want to focus on how did the deep listening types skills helped you to see the system and what questions emerged for you for the stakeholders. But these questions you will also find on your on the sheet to work with. And how we will do these exercises, it won't be just in Zoom or just talking. This might be a little bit tricky to do. We actually prepared a mural whiteboard for you to collaborate online. So if you can go to the next slide, Matthias. So I'm sure some of you might already have experience with Mural or eventually Miro, which is a very similar tool. It's basically an online collaboration platform, and it is a shared whiteboard where all of us can interact and edit together, almost like in a Google Drive file where we can see directly the changes of one person broadcasted to everyone. And before we go to the exercise, I just want to give you a very short introduction to Mural, especially for the people who haven't had the chance yet to work with the tool. And yeah, then we'll have a very short exercise just to get familiar with Mural, and then we will head into the group exercises together. So Matthias, if you can give me the power to share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So this is our Mural page that we prepared for today. We will send you the link in a second. First, I just want to show you kind of what are the basic things on Mural. So first of all, if I zoom out, I see like the whole white area is kind of our working space that we can work on. And there are like different frames on it with different information that we will go through. So first of all, I made here like a little cheat sheet for Mural and for the most important functions. The first thing is, how do we actually move around on Mural? So you already seen like zooming in, zooming out is on my mouse wheel, but you can also use your trackpad as you're familiar with it to zoom. And for navigation, so for moving around, there's two ways. The first is like the move mode. You can activate this here with this little hand. So if you click on this, you're in move mode. And so you can just quickly drag and click and drag over the canvas without changing anything. So this is just like kind of a viewing mode. If you want to edit something, it doesn't work with this mode. So it's really just moving and watching. If you click on it again to turn off the moving mode, then you're in editing mode. And now I can actually interact with the elements on the board. So I can drag and drop them and also edit them. However, I can still move when I click on an empty area. Here it's just now you need to be careful that you don't accidentally click on an item, although you wanted to move around. But even that is no problem. As you can see up here, there's an undo button. So everything you might change accidentally, you can easily undo. And also to help you with navigating a little bit, we locked most of the things on the page. So you don't need to be super careful. I can lock things, or we lock things, and then you can, even though you click on it, you can kind of still move around. So just that you know. So this for the navigating. Then another very interesting functionality is following another user. So down here, for example, now I see all the different users that are logged in. And I can now, for example, click here on follow Malika. And now I would see exactly the screen that Malika is seeing. And I can just follow and share her view. If I want to stop it, I can just click somewhere or zoom in and zoom out, and then I gain control again of my mural. There's also a functionality that I will use at times as a facilitator. I can summon everyone. So that means I kind of suggest you to follow me. And as long as you don't click or zoom, you see exactly the screen that I see on my laptop. And finally, because you will also supposed to work in Mural to add and edit objects, want to show you quickly like how you can do that. On the left, you have kind of all the different objects, all the different items that you can use. So for text, it's like the upper icon. And then from here, I can just drag and drop, for example, the text box onto the mural and can close this. And then here I have this new element that I can move around. And if I can double click on it and then actually adjust it and change the text. When I click once on it, I also have different possibilities to change the size, to, for example, make it bold, also can change the color and so on and so on. If you have variables, it is going to be handy to copy and paste them. So you can also just Control Z, Control V, and then you just copied the variable from before, name this variable 2, and then you have 2 variables. One thing which is also going to be important for the exercise, of course, when we do system maps, we want to draw connections, we want to draw causal links. And this is also fairly easy in Mural. You have to hold C on your keyboard. So you're holding the C on your keyboard, then you see that the cursor is changing, and then you can click on one variable, drag it, and release on the other variable to create the connection. And now we have a connection from variable 1 to variable 2. And also, if you click on it once, you have like different options to change the look of it. One important one for us is the switch type. If we click on it, then we have an additional bubble in the middle that we can then drag and drop and make like the loopy connections that we want to have for the system map afterwards. And yeah, last but not least, how can we delete items? It's also relatively easy. We just click on them and click delete, and then they're erased from the whole Mural board. All right, and if you that was too quick, or later you want some more information, you can always find this on Mural, this overview, and can have a look back at it. And just to kind of get used to it with it a little bit and try different things in Mural, we thought of a very small little exercise that we would like to play with you, which is about connections in urban life, where you will take like a different element or a different actor within the urban sphere and connect them with each other. But let's first actually invite you to Mural, that you can also open it. 2 more last notes. Best use Firefox or Chrome to open Mural, because Internet Explorer apparently has some problems. And second, when you log in, it will show you like an animal name, a suggested animal name. You can click on that and actually change it to your actual name, that we can see who you actually are and not just the animal. All right, then I stop sharing, and we'll see you then on the Mural board in a second. So I see 10 people already online. Please let us know if any one of you has problems with logging in and seeing it.
So I will be opening the breakout groups in a few seconds.
Should we first wanted to do the exercise, Matthias, with everyone together before going into the breakout groups? So maybe just let's wait 2 more minutes to just try this out, and then we can break out. All right. So if everyone who's on Mural can come to my area, to my mouse, so you can click on the. Actually, I can summon you to me. So now summoned everyone, so you should all see my screen. And yeah, I'm on this little exercise area. And yeah, so basically, first I would all like you to choose one of the variables on the left and put it on the outer line of the circle. And remember, of course, which variable you chose. So you can do that. And if you want to leave the following me functionality, you can just click somewhere or zoom and then you're free to edit. All right, that looks great. I'm also going to choose one. I'm going to take the urban green and put it there. All right, so everyone choose their variable. And then second, I would like to ask you for your variable to connect it to 3 other variables on the circle where you think there's a strong connection and interdependency. And remember, if you want to draw a connection, you have to hold the key C, then your cursor is changing, and then you can connect your variable with another variable in the circle. That looks very nice. I see the web is growing. Does it work well for everyone? Nice.
Yeah. Just how do we turn off our big names moving around the board?
Ah, that's a good point. If you go on the bottom to the little circles, and if you go on your own circle, like your own little avatar or animal, you can hover your mouse over it and then say hide cursors, or stop broadcasting my cursor, I think is the option. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matthias.
Hide cursors.
Yeah, then you can hide all the cursors basically. Great. So yeah, that was a little exercise to get familiar a little bit with Mural. And on the side, it also, of course, shows, especially in a system as the city, we have a very strong web of interconnections, and it's quite easy to find different dependencies and relations within the different elements. But this was mostly now focusing on how to use Mural. Are there any questions from you? Just kind of navigating, editing, doing things in Mural. Great. If there are any problems, then yeah, feel free to shout out or write in the chat. Then I would move on to the exercise. For that, I would summon you once more to my screen to briefly talk you through the different templates that we prepared. So exactly, we put you in 6 groups, 2 on traffic jam, 2 on infection spread, 2 on food shortage. And as you see, you can find here your group and the different templates. We mainly prepared the templates to make it a little bit easier for you to use Mural and to guide you through the different steps. And so just briefly, so first you see here your case study and the statements by the different stakeholders. Then the first step is to collect variables for each of the stakeholders that you hear within the statement. Here's also a short list of instructions and some tips how to formulate variables. So here's the example for the city administration. So these were the variables that we heard. Then there's a second step where we want to see the interconnections between those variables. So for each stakeholder, we put the variables, just as for the city example, on the circle and kind of see, okay, which variables directly influence each other. Do this for every stakeholder. then we move on to the system map. So then we're trying to develop a small system map for each stakeholder, but also want to see how do they actually interconnect, what are the dependencies between them. And finally, as the last exercise, we have a small reflection. If you now listen to the statements again with an open heart, what emotions do you hear? And what might be follow-up questions that emerged for you that you would like to ask the stakeholders? And finally, for your group, we also put here kind of what is the question for your group during the group presentation. And of course, we also give you a little cheat sheet, especially for stage 3 for the system map. So here you can see again, okay, what are variables? What are causal connections, like with the plus, the minus, and the delay? And also, what are feedback loops, like the reinforcing one and the balancing one, and how we can actually identify them. Maybe just a quick note on the causal connections. Normally, we put plus and minuses, and also this delay mark on there. This is a little bit tricky in Mural. So we decided it's better if you just use a solid line for the plus and a dashed line for the minus, and eventually colored orange if you see there are significant delays which you would like to highlight. Great. Malika, did I forget anything? Anything you would like to add?
No, but I think that Matthias has organized the group so that there is somebody who has used Mural before, isn't it, Matthias?
Yep.
Yeah. So because we don't want to lose time, you know, like with Mural, the objective is to get going with doing the system map. So hopefully there's one person who's familiar with Mural in your group, and whoever is familiar with Mural in the group will be the one who start doing the variable as you're talking about, you know, who will do the drawings. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
great, thanks. And also Malika and I will kind of jump around the groups. So if you have questions for the process, we will be like joining every group at a different time to answer those and to help you with the development of the map. Great. Then if there's no questions from, are there any questions from you for the exercise for Mural? If
Could
not,
you just remind the total time that we will spend in the breakouts?
Ah, yeah, that's a good point. Exactly. It's going to be 35 to 40 minutes for the exercise. Also, of course, depending how well you get through. But we always have like an indication at the top of the mural as kind of a hint how much time we see for that exercise eventually. All right, then Matthias.
Just one. Okay. Just one
Sorry,
thing.
Monica.
Yeah, so we will adapt the time that you're in breakout groups depending if everybody has finished the exercise. So right now we want it to be 30 minutes, to be between 30 and 40 minutes. And if we find that certain groups have not finished, we might extend it. So yeah, we will liaise with Matthias around that. But right now it's 4 o'clock, so we're 10 minutes behind. So hopefully we finish around in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then we'll adapt if groups haven't finished. Yeah, okay. Over to you, Matthias, to put us into groups. Who from the group can answer that if you had time to reflect, or just on the spot right now?
I think it was us. We didn't have much time to reflect, but I think it allowed us to step out from the different point of views of the different stakeholders, as like the others were saying as well. and trying to get more factual and build connections with more actual, or at least like what we thought to be factual parts of the system. And yes, it was really interesting, but still it was interesting also to have the perceptions and the loops around perceptions. That was also quite insightful.
Great, great. And we don't have time to actually show you the system map, but we will actually share it. So you can compare what you know, where you have come at right now. And in our goodbye card, we will actually put the system map. So what you see there is, you know, like all those different loops actually interconnect and are influencing each other. Either they are balancing each, you know, those factors, or they're reinforcing those factors. And you see how policies actually often have unintended consequences. So we will share that. And because we just have 8 minutes, Matthias, if you could just share the screen, share the presentation. So we will go into soon an exercise where you will tell us, next one, where you will tell us where do you want to grow and stretch yourself, and where do you want to apply the art of system practice. And based on your reflection, we will produce a cloud diagram. We will send you the link soon. But I just wanted to quickly tell you that actually what I found beautiful in systems practice is that it reinforces certain traits that you would like in your work, probably. So it reinforces, the more you apply systems practice, the more you're able to cooperate with your actors, understand the world around you, and leads to your own personal growth because you understand yourself in the system. So the next few slides is just for you to read when you get our slide. So for cooperating with actors, as you build the system map, you create space for multiple perspectives, you create a shared understanding of the system. You probably today had a light touch of what this looks like. You see hidden connections, you understand the actors better. So basically the trait that you will reinforce in yourself is curiosity, openness, strong interpersonal skills, and emotional intelligence. Next one. Next one. So as you do system practice, you understand the world around you cognitively, so with the head, and emotionally. So you see the bigger picture, you start visualizing complexity, and again, the hidden connection, actors better. And last one, Matthias, next one. So very important as a change maker, it's very important to learn from the system continuously, but also to ask the right questions as you engage in system practice and understand your own influence in the system. So your own emotion and your own driver. So it's very important to see yourself. What are you reinforcing it? What loop are you reinforcing, or what loop are you balancing? So you have an ability to see your own influence in the system. Next slide, Matthias. So we want to just take 2 minutes to ask you to just self-reflect on these 2 questions. Where do you want to grow and stretch yourself in systems practice? Just write a few words, and then we will send you a link where you can put those few words. And where do you want to apply the art of systems practice for collective leadership? So just start reflecting on those 2 questions. In 2 minutes, I will send you the link where we'll produce a cloud diagram. a link to menti.com with the code. So please go to that link and start adding your reflections to it. So we can see the cloud. And at this stage, Matthias or Alexandra, could you take over with sharing the screen so we can show the cloud diagram that's coming?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. We start seeing listening, understanding, simplifying language, generative listening, integrate to platforms, systems-based theory, leadership, empathy, radical, compassion, listening, tools. What else? New, empathic listening, sharing with others, simplify language, knowledge, radical. And now it's on to where do you want to practice? Where do you want to practice it? In what area? In what field? In what would you like to practice systems practice for collective leadership? So the next question in menti.com. Yeah, so pick 3 words that describe how you want or where you want to apply the, so that's the more practical question, where you want to do it. Great, I see a media worldviews. And Simon, in the goodbye card that we will see, we will send you a link to Amanda Ripley, who talks about the media should complicate the narrative so that we don't have polarization. So there is a beautiful video of how journalists should engage in deeper listening. So I see media worldviews, adaptive management. So you would like to practice it in system transformation, stakeholder engagement, leaders of change in community, in UNDP, great, in theory of change, wonderful. Family, that's interesting. In consensus, in solutions, gold circles. Oh, I'm very curious what all this means. So we will capture what you have, what you're writing right now, and we will send you those beautiful creative artwork you're doing right now into in our goodbye card. And Jeanne, as we are leaving right now, we have a poem, but I see that we are 1 minute behind time or ahead of time, behind time. So we will leave you. We will not leave you with the poem, but you can read it in our presentation. It's a beautiful poem by Rumi. It's about starting to see. It's 2 worlds are coming across: the world where you see your own mental model and the world where you start seeing the world as it is. And it tells you, don't go back to sleep, go to this new world of seeing things as they are. So this is the invitation in systems practice. And we would really, really like to thank you for having participated in our system practice. And on this note, I'd like to invite Jeanne.
Yes, thank you. Maybe Matthias, you can just show the last slide of the presentation to kind of wrap things up. Exactly. Also from my side, thanks a lot for participating. Also for your work today. It was great to see how the maps kind of slowly evolved, and all your groups were very much into the discussion. And I hope you got like the spark of what such a systemic inquiry can kind of spread and start. And yeah, so thanks a lot also from my side. Please, if you have questions, comments, feel free to reach out to us. Also feel free to add us on LinkedIn for ongoing conversations about systems. And yeah, it's been a great joy and great fun from my side.
And Matthias, if you could just show one slide before, which will be our goodbye card with the resources we will send to you. Yeah, exactly. So we will send you the causal loop diagrams that you've just built so you can compare. Please go and into this world and explore, and we will send you the link to the video recordings and also really some wonderful resource and literature for system mapping. So this is not the end. We will send it. Matthias will send it to you. And thank you a lot, the team, Matthias and Alexandra and Sandra. It was wonderful to work with you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Unmute yourself and say thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.